So we're now on Daf Gimel Amid Beis, and we studied a Mishnah in Masechet Moed Katan in the third chapter, Noshim B'Moed Ma'anos, on Chol Moed, for the sake of Kvod Talmid Chacham, we're going to permit the women to sing dirges, but lo mitapchos, we will not permit them to beat their chests. That's already a higher, more intense level of avelus, and it's antithetical to simchas harega. Some say it's a reference here, mitapchos, is to clapping one's hands together, striking one's hands against one's thigh or one's face. Rabbi Yishmael Omer, he says that im hayu smuchos mita, those women who are close to the mita, the coffin that's being taken out for burial, is af mitapchos. We can even allow mitapchos. That's a level of cover that intensifies and overrides as far as mitapchos is concerned, not makonos. V'roshei chadash mechanik b'purim ma'anos v'mitapchos. We're going to allow both the singing of dirges and the clapping and all that. But whether it's Chol Moed or alternative Rosh Chodesh Chanukah and Purim, Eino Mekonos. We're not going to allow Mekonos, the wailing of the lamentations. And with regard to Mekonos, it's Achas Omeres V'Kulon Onos Achreo. It's like responsive crying. That intense level of Mekonos we're not going to permit, neither on Rosh Chodesh Chanukah and Purim, and certainly not on Moed. The Omer Afuna, Rabbi Bar Afuna, Ein Moed B'fnei Talmid Chacham. The laws that we had until now are addressing a regular person and covered ames. But if we're burying a Talmid Chacham who died, then even on Chol Moed, we're going to allow mitapchos umakonanos. The Kolshkin have it also on Chanukah and Purim. And in the case of Purim, which again is more kal than the Moed, we're going to allow l'tapech bahem al kol adam. Now, as a result, we're going to be mevatel kriyas hamegillah. So we see that covered for Talmud Torah, for a Talmud Chacham, even of a yachid, of an individual, is more common than Mikra Megillah. We're going to trump Mikra Megillah for the sake of kavod of an individual, because he's a Talmud Chacham. So once again, we have to ask a question and raise an objection to Beis Rebbe, who are mevatel Talmud Torah of a yachid for the sake of Mikra Megillah. And the answer is, wait, let's differentiate between kavod Torah and Talmud Torah. Kavod Torah, Ka'amrit, you want to make an analogy and a proof from kavod Torah in terms of the burial of a dead, that for sure is more chomer and trumps Mikra Megillah. However, when we're talking about Torah de Yachid, that's chomer, but Talmud Torah de Yachid, that's kal. Meaning, if we compare Talmud Torah de Yachid to Megillah, then it doesn't size up to Mikra Megillah. We're going to be mevatel Talmud Torah de Yachid in order to come and hear the Megillah. Amar Rava Pshitali, I have no doubt about the following. I have a whole list of cases that are pashut till we lead up to Rava's suffering. Number one that's pashut is avoda u Mikra Megillah aduf. So if on the one hand you have avoda the Bigdash, and you have now a head-on competition, a collision with Mikra Megillah B'tzibur, then you come to hear Mikra Megillah, and that's based on Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina, that we had here on Daf Gimel and Aleph. He darshans from the words Mishpacha, and Mishpachos of Kahuna and Leviah, Amavatlim, Vera Voda, in order to come and hear the Megillah. Furthermore, it's Pashut, says Rava, that Talmud Torah Mikra Megillah, Adif, Midas Samchu Shal Beis Rebbe. As we said, in the name of Beis Rebbe, if an individual is learning Torah, he should cease his learning Torah in order to come and hear Mikra Megillah. And they derive this from a Kavachom from Avoda. If Mikra Megillah is Docha Avoda, which is more Chomer, how much more so it's Docha the Mitzvah Talmud Torah, which is Kala. Furthermore, it's Pashut that Talmud Torah makes mitzvah Odiv. Makes mitzvah trumps Talmud Torah. When there's a need to bury the dead, and you're the one to do it because there's no one else around to bury the dead, it's a mes hamutal b'derech ein mishi yisasek b'kfuraso, and we have to urgently bury the dead. Then you would certainly be mavatal your Talmud Torah for the sake of burying a mes mitzvah. It's a great, great mitzvah. Midasanya, we have a Bryce and Vatlan Talmud Torah lo tzas hames ulachnosis kala. For the sake of escorting the dead for the levaya of Kvura, because we have to bury the dead, or for the sake of the levaya of taking a kala from Beis Aviyah to the Beis Kupasa, all this will trump Talmud Torah. And the Rashba says that this brisa is addressing even a case of Shar Mason, that we mevatel Talmud Torah b'shas al tzol l'kfura, not only mes mitzvah. And when the Gemara says mes mitzvah odiv, then this is mentioned agav the Divrei Gemara b'hemshech that mes mitzvah avoda, where we'll see there the din is that dafka mes mitzvah will trump avoda. Avoda mes mitzvah odiv. It's also posh to the same extent that mes mitzvah is odif mi Talmud Torah, it's also odif me avodah, and all the tzarchei mes come first, and they trump the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash. And we're going to derive this mi le'achosa, ulachosa. There's an extra word in the parish of Nazir, in Parashas Nazir, the Sanya. We learned in a brisa with regard to the Isser of a Nazir to contaminate himself to the dead, and the Torah says in Parashas Nazir, al nefesh meis lo yavel li'av li'imo ula'achiv ula'chosa lo yitama ula'chosa lo yitama matamid lomer. What does this pasuk teach? It already says al nefesh meis lo yavel. Included in that is the Isser Mitami for all Mason, even for his sister. But we're going to darshan. And this is the drush of the Brisa. Haresha Haya Holich Lishchot is Pischa. He's on his way to Shechter Korban Pesach on the 14th of Nisan. Bilamul, or alternatively, to circumcise his bino. V'shamash meislo mes. He hears that one of his 7 relatives passed away. And if he'll be mitami to the mess and bury his relative, he will not be able to bring his Korban Pesach. He'll be tomei, and he'll have absolutely no time to get involved in Asiyas Pesach, or for that matter, for Milas Bino. Is Yochel, I might think, Yitame? Maybe he should be Mitame to his relative, even if it means pushing off Pesach and Milah. No. We're not going to say that. Why? Amrit lo yitam. In the Parsha of Nazir, it says lo yitam. And just like in the case of Nazir, he's not going to be mevatel as Naziris in order to be metami to his krovim. So too, he's not going to be mevatel from his Korban Pesach or his Milah in order to be metami li tamei lehem. And the Bryce says Yochol kishem she'eino metami lachosa. If he's on his way to Shechter Korban Pesach, he's not going to contaminate himself for the sake of his burial. Kach, I might think, Eino mitame lemes mitzvah, tamulomo lachoso tieno mitame, avo mitame lemes mitzvah. We see clearly that mes mitzvah trumps Pesach, which is avodah. So we have no doubt that mes mitzvah trumps Talmud Torah, as we said before, and from this lachosu, it even trumps the avodah, in this case, the mitzvah of Korban Pesach. So all the above are pshit. And now we get to the suffix of Rav Boy, Rav Mikra Megillah mes mitzvah ha'minayu. We've seen that Mikra Megillah is one up it on avodah, one up it on Talmud Torah, and we mevatel avoda, or Talmud Torah for the sake of Mikra Megillah. On the other hand, we saw that Mes Mitzvah trumps both Talmud Torah and avoda. So where do we put Mes Mitzvah vis-a-vis Mikra Megillah? Does he go to hear the public reading of the Megillah, or should he be metapel with the Tzarchei HaMes in the case of someone, there's no one there to, take care of the mess and bury the dead? And the Gemara says, shall we analyze this by introducing Pirsum Hanes, Mikra Megillah Adif Mishum Persume Nisa? There's an additional dimension to Mikra Megillah that puts it on an upgraded level, such that now we would trump even Mes Mitzvah for the sake of this Pirsum Hanes. And this reminds us of a Gemara we once learned in Masechet Shabbos. If he only has enough money for Ner Chanukah or for Kiddush Halayla, Kiddush Yayin on Shabbos, and there's a great adifus to Ner Chanukah because of Pirsum Hanes. Here also in Mikra Megillah, there's a great adifus and an upgraded status to Mikra Megillah because of the element of Pirsum Hanes, which might be a giyum of Kiddush Hashem. Is Mikra Megillah adif? Oh, Dilma, should we say no? This is Rabbi's vast. Mes Mitzvah adif mishum kvod habrios. Mes Mitzvah is the ultimate, and it overrides everything. It overrides avodah, and it overrides Talmud Torah, and it'll override even Mikra Megillah. Mes Mitzvah adif, Mes Mitzvah should trump Mikra Megillah. The Omar Mar, we have the following statement: Gadol Kavod Habrios shedoches lo seish b'Torah. The strength and the importance of Kavod Habrios is such that it even allows a violation of a lo taseh of the Torah. And in the parasha of Ashot Zaveda, in Kitetze, it says, Vasalamta mehem. And the Gemara darshans that there are cases, situations in which you're allowed to be Masalim, and you're not obligated to get involved in the mitzvah Shabbos Zaveda. Like, for example, a motzi ken, a motzi, meaning he finds a lost sheep, let's say that's roaming, and he's a zaken. It's enel lefich vodo. Take the aveda. So gavad kavla brisha dochalose of losuchal saleh. That puts it on a higher level in the mitzvah of Mikra Megillah. And Yeshua is bothered by this because, okay, we see that Kavod Habrios is so great and so weighty and heavy that it's docha as we saw in Lo Suchal L'Saleh. But nevertheless, how do you know that it's docha even Kriyas HaMegillah? Because a mitzvah saseh could be docha a lo saseh. And Mikra Megillah is docha mitzvah aseh, like Avodah and Talmud Torah. And if mitzvah aseh is greater than a lo saseh, because eseh docha lo saseh, then Mikra Megillah, which is docha and eseh, certainly should be docha lo saseh. So great, you've proven that Kavod Habrios is docha lo saseh, but even Mikra Megillah is docha lo saseh. How do I know which of the two are greater? The Pnei Yeshua answers that the language of Gadol Kavod Habrios indicates that that's the reason for the Dechiyah. And therefore the Gemara thinks that you docha even Mikra Megillah for the sake of Kavod Habrios. Gufa, let's go back to Rabbi Shimon Levi and clarify what he said on Rabbi Shimon Levi Krach. B'chol ha'samachot, b'chol ha'nireh imo nidon kikrach. We'll read the Megillah on the 15th, not only in the great urban centers, the metropolis, but also in outlying areas that are either some close enough, within 2,000 hours, or nireh, which means that you can see the krach from that place outside the krach, that location. Bishleim and nireh afal pi. Oh, so Tana, we have a brisa, and the brisa says somach af pichein and nireh af pichein and somach. Each one is enough for justification to generate an obligation to read the Megillah on the 15th, we don't need both of them to be checked off. They're not two conditions. There's only one condition. You have a choice of the two. And you can have one without the other. So Bishlam, the Gemara says, Nira afal pisheno somuch. I can understand. Nishkachas lo kugondi yasud rosh ha'ar. If, for example, you have a city that's on top of a mountain, and from that high vantage point, it can see a large distance, and it can see an ir mukefes chomim, that I understand. It's not someone, it's really far away from Shusha. But nevertheless, because it's higher up in the altitude on a mountain, you can see it. So it's nearer without someone. But someone, if it's already close, in other words, if your city is on a very low area, and even though it is samuch, it's very close to the krach, but never right within a meal, as we said before. Nevertheless, it's not near his imo, because it's Yosheves benachal. From that vantage point, the nachal, you can't see anything above ground. Certainly not the krach. V'yomer Rabbi Yishmael Levi krach sheyosha u'lebasof hukav idon kikfar. If at the beginning they settled the krach and they built houses in the krach, and then afterwards they set up a wall around these houses, and we're talking about a krach that had a wall from the time of Yoshua ben Nun, is nidon kikfar. This is not called hekev choma. Why? Because the people already moved in before they built the choma sviv habayis habatim. So it already was engraved in stone. Engraved in stone that it doesn't have the status of a krach. Because it was settled and there was no choma, no Yeshua ben Nun. So it's not considered mukaf, and it's not a krach. That's mukaf mi Mos Yeshua. My timer. And we're going to derive this from a parsha at the end of Vayikra, the Tziv, the Ish ki yimkor bayis, base moshav, ir choma. A base moshav of an ir choma means that they built these homes or these structures, these batim, inside a choma that already existed. And that's called hukaf u'b'sof yasha. V'lo sheyasha u'b'sof hukaf. You may have a relatively large city, but you need 10 people that are b'telim b'malacha and are supported by the tzibur, so that they can be always available for Beis HaKnesset, for Shachris, for Yarvis. Is that city or that town does not have 10 batlanim, is nidon kikfar, and therefore you'll be makdim the kriyas hamegillah yom haknisa. Ma'ikar mashma and Tanina. Why do I need this chiddush of Rabbi Yishmael Levi? We have it already in a brisa. Ezui ir gedola. What is considered a large city, and it's no longer a kfar. It's yotza mechlal kfar. Nichnas lechlal ir, and therefore it reads on the 14th. All sheyesh ba'asar batlanim, pachos mikan arezek kfar. So the minimum population to set up a din of an ir, a status of an ir for the kriya on Yudal is asar batlanim. So therefore, So now, what's the Gemara's kasha? That pachos mikan, if it's less than asar batlanim, it's a kfar. So why did Rabbi Shimon Levi feel compelled to tell me and reiterate what's explicit in the Brisa? I mean, he's not telling me anything new. And Gemara says, Krach Itzrach. Rabbi Shimon Levi had to tell me a chiddush of a din that applies even to a krach, which is a makom shvakim. It's usually, filled with marketplaces. People come there from all different areas, and it's great. It's a great city. It's an ir gedolah. Afal gav even though many people come from the outside, they gravitate towards this city. And many of them are batel mimalach, because they only do malach in their city, but not when they gravitate to another city. So even if there are no asar batlanim amongst the population here in this city, but not be choshesh, ein lanu lachsho shelo yeh bo asara batlanim mikol hanimtsoim bo. From this massive population in this urban center, there certainly will be asar batlanim. Then even this is the chiddush of Rabbi Shimon Levi. We need asar batlanim that are kvuim be'ir, because we could have suggested that even if they're not kvuim be'ir, but rather they come into the city, they gravitate to the city. Many of them are batel mimalacha, and in such a case, even though there are not asar batlanim here in the city, we should give it the status of a city and a krach, and not that of a kfar. That's what Rabbi Shimon Levi has to teach me. No, there's an absolute requirement of asar batlanim. They have to be kvuim in the city, and without that, it's not called a krach. It's not considered like an ear. And we're always choshesh that im ye'arish al yimtzu asar b'veis haknes. V'yom Rabbi Shimon Levi krach shechorev u'lebasof yosha nidon kikrach. So initially, it was settled as a krach, and it had all the requirements of a krach. And then it became chorev. It was unfortunately, tragically destroyed. My chorev, what does it mean it was destroyed? Ilema charvu chomosav. If we're going to say that it was mukaf choma initially, and then the choma was destroyed. And on that point, in that scenario, Rabbi Shimon Levi says that if it was hukam shuv hachomos, if they re-establish and assemble the chomos, then they read on tesva. So that's difficult. Why? Is it only because of Yasha that it was built within the chomos? And Yashav means before the chomos were built, they were already settling in the city, and then they read it on tesva, but implying that lo Yashav. Lo, we do not let them read them on tesva, they'll read on Yudal. And that's what Rabbi Shimon Levi meant when he said, Krach shechorev v'sof yashav nidon kikrach. Vatanya, with regard to selling a bias in a walled city, it says Rabbi Lezer ben Yossi Omer, and I'm going to read the whole pasuk. It says, "V'koma bias asher ba'ir asher lo chom," and it says lo, and the implication is that there's no choma protecting this city. And the korim lo, in other words, when it says asher lo chom, lo with a vav, but without the aleph, because again, we have it as lamed vav aleph, but lo without the aleph is mashma that it has a chom, asher lo chom. So we're going to darshan that afal tisha ein lo achshav v'haya kodem lachem, even though now, currently, there is no choma. Nevertheless, since it once had a choma earlier, we're going to give it the status of a mukach choma. And here he adds, Harei shekrach shechorvo chomosav, yesh lo din mukaf, af al pi shelo nivna chomos. So how can Rabbi Shimon Levi say that it's got to be dafka nivna hachomos? Then it has a din of a krach. And the Gemara answers, Ella, we're not talking about here a krach shecharvu chomosav. My charev, what is the word charev? What's the intention of the word charev? Shecharev me'asar batlanim. That the number of batlanim went down. I guess people either died or they moved away. And then chazu liyavos asar batlanim. Once again, they had asar batlanim. And we're going to classify it as a krach. In makdimu yom haknisa. So the chiddush is that even though batul mimenu pamachas asar batlanim, we're not choshesh that situation, that scenario will repeat itself. She's batlu shu. The Omer Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. And here we turn to the Daled. Lod, V'ono, V'gei, Hacharosh. These were cities in the area of Binyamin, Binyamin's territory. Is Mukafos Choma Mi'emos Yoshua ben Nunam. So these cities were walled cities back at the time of Yoshua ben Nun. Where asked for Hani, these cities, Yoshua ben Nani, he built them. And therefore there was a Choma at his time. How could you say such a thing? For Al Pa'al, some member of the tribe of Yomi by the name of Al Pa'al ben Nani, he built it. And he was born Doros, later, generations after they entered into Eretz Yisrael. The Tzid, as recorded in Divrei Yomim, Ubnei Alfal, Aver Umisham Vashemer, who, he meaning Alfal, Bana es Ono ves Lod, Ubenosel. So you see that these were built after Yoshua. Therefore, they couldn't have been considered Mukafas Choma B'Mos Yoshua. So the Gemara says, and your question is based on a shita. You're assuming that when it says with regard to Alpha, the Hu Bana, that means he built it from the beginning. Hu Bana mitchila es ha'orma elu. But the truth is that even Alpha did not build these cities. It was really the Melech Os. In the generations later on, Benani built them. Tiksiv Vayiven Ore Mitsura B'Yehuda. So this is a Gemara which we'll try to Mitzvah pick up tomorrow here on Daf Daled Amid Al. So let's just make a note of where we got up to. Ulatame. Okay. All right. Wishing you a great day.